Rachel here on behalf of New York Bioforce, and today we're going over some basic pipetting technique and dilutions techniques. But first I wanted to go over just some basics of micropipettes. So you'll see these in almost every wet lab you go into. They're micropipetters, and they come in, there's several different parts that I want to discuss about these. First of all, they come in different sizes. So I've got two different sizes here. It usually says somewhere on the top or on the side what ranges they're calibrated for. And these are for measuring microliter amounts. So this bigger one here I have is called a P1000. So it measures between 100 and 1000 microliter volumes. And this medium-sized one I have here is a P100. So that measures between 10 and 100 microliter volumes. There are a couple common components to all of the micropipetters. First of all, you'll see a window with numbers on it, and that is the volume that you're measuring. And you always want to be aware of what size pipette you have to understand what these number places are. So this is a P1000. Again, I see that on the top and on the front face here. And so because of that, I know when I'm using all four places, that's the most I can use, that it would be 1000. So I have just to the ones place, I don't have any decimal places that I can measure here. On the other hand, this is my P100. So again, you can see on the top that it's accurate between 10 and 100 microliters. And here I also have four number places. Because I know 100 microliters is the most I can measure, when I have a 1 all the way at the top, that means that this last number, the fourth place, is actually the the decimal place for the tenths. This pipette has a line on it to denote the decimal place. Not all do. So just beware when you're using your pipettes what those number places actually are. To adjust your pipette, the tops will turn, and as you turn them, you increase or decrease the volume. And to actually use the pipette, once you've adjusted, so I will adjust this, we'll say to 27.1 microliters. And then I place this in my hand so that this lip is comfortably over my index finger. And when I depress the top button, I'm gonna feel it stop once. And I notice that if I push even harder, it will stop a second time, and that's all the way. And it's very important to understand this so you pipette accurately. So pressing to the first place you feel stop, that's going to measure the volume that you've dialed the dial to. So I'll demo that in a minute. If I push all the way past and draw up liquid, I will draw up more than the measured volume. So you don't want to do that. You want to push down to the first stop. You'll slowly draw up your liquid. And then when you dispense, use that second push to dispense everything out. So I'm just going to demo here. I'm going to actually use my bigger pipette now. So I'm going to dial this to 500. So it's 500 microliters or half a mil. I'm going to open up my tip box, and I just gently press down so my tip's on tight, and I'm going to push down again to that first stop. So that's that first stop. Here's the second. So I'll do that again. The first stop, I feel pressure, and the second is all the way. So I want to make sure I go just to the first stop. I keep that firm pressure on. I stick my tip in my liquid and slowly release my thumb upward, which is going to draw up 500 microliters. So you can see that that entire tip is filled with liquid up to about halfway. There's no air bubbles in this. There's no air bubble at the bottom. And then to dispense, I'm going to just dispense actually to the same tube. So I push to the first stop is my 500. And sometimes you can see this is to the first stop. There's a tiny little drop left. That's what that second push is for, to get that last little bit out. And then I release, and I have an empty tip. So I want to demonstrate quickly the two most common types of pipetting errors. So So I'm going to pull out 3 tubes. So again, my pipetter is on 500 microliters. I'm going to first pipette correctly. So I push down to the first stop, stick my tip in, slowly draw up my 500 microliters, and then dispense it into this first tube. So I'm going to inject it and push that second. So that's my first tube, that's correct. A really common thing is to draw up too much volume, and that happens when you push too far. And so I'm pushed all the way now past the first stop. I'm going to draw up a volume. Because I've pipetted a lot, I can tell that I've drawn up too much. But if you're a little less experienced, you might not know, and I'm going to dispense that. And what you should see when you look at these 2 tubes is that I have a higher volume in that second tube. I've drawn out more than 500 microliters, and that's because I went past the first stop when I drew up my volume. And the other common type of error is to under pipette, and that's if I push down to that first stop, and then if you're not used to that keeping pressure on, you might accidentally release your thumb a little bit, and then I draw up slowly, and I can tell again that that's a little low because I'm used to pipetting, but you might not know. So when I dispense that, you can see here I've got too little volume. So I'm going to actually hold those up so they can be seen. So here is my correct volume, and here is where I over pipetted. So I pushed down all the way and drew up the liquid. So I have too much volume. That's not correct. That's not 500 microliters. And then the second example was where I released my thumb a little bit off from the first stop, so I ended up with too little volume. Those are really common, and as you get practice and a feel for the pipette, you will accurately pipette your correct volume every time. And then the last little bit about a pipetter is to eject that tip. We don't want to use our hands. So to eject, there's always a button on the side, and you just push that and it ejects. And so that's the basics of a micropipetter.